The Tennessee Titans should not trade for George Pickens, but I'll tell you what they should do in free agency on today's edition of Locked On Titans.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, on today's show, I am going to tell you why the Tennessee Titans should not trade for George Pickens, but we're also going to go over all of the free agent signings that I would do in a perfect offseason for the Tennessee Titans. Before I dive into it, I do want to thank you for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one. Again, we're going to talk a bunch of free agency stuff on today's show. Free agency is just around the corner. If you want to stay as up to date, as informed, and as entertained as a Tennessee Titans fan could possibly be, make sure that you stay locked in with the Locked On Titans podcast. But with that being said, again, the Tennessee Titans should not consider a trade for George Pickens. It just makes no sense whatsoever. Now, if Pickens was out on the open market, maybe the Tennessee Titans should consider him as a free agent. But the reality is the Dallas Cowboys are not going to let George Pickens go to free agency. They traded a lot of capital for him to get him on the Cowboys. He had a fantastic season last year. They're not going to let him go for nothing. They are going to apply the franchise tag, which means the only avenue the Titans would have to get Pickens is, again, a trade, which they should not do. And here's why. Number one, it's the same conversation that we had about a guy like Max Crosby, and I would make a trade for Max Crosby way before I made a trade for George Pickens. But this team is not in a position to trade draft picks and give away a big contract to go get a player. They're just not in a spot to do that. They won 3 games last year, and I expect the Tennessee Titans will be better. But in my mind, better is 6 wins, 7 wins. If the Titans win 8 games, we should throw a parade off that. But the Tennessee Titans are not a George Pickens or a Max Crosby away from being Super Bowl contenders. And that's the only time. Like when the Philadelphia Eagles traded for A.J. Brown. When the Green Bay Packers traded for Micah Parsons. Those are playoff teams that need that superior player to push them over the edge. That's not where the Tennessee Titans are. So trading for a guy like Pickens, from the financial perspective, from the draft capital perspective, it doesn't make any sense. Then you add in the personality concerns, the locker room issues, being late to meetings, not being locked into his assignment, not knowing his routes, not knowing the playbook. He's just not the kind of guy that you risk draft picks, a big contract, and then bring him into your locker room. Like that combination of 3 things right there, giving up picks, giving a big time contract, and the impact that he can have on your young culture, they cannot go out and get George Pickens. Again, the calculation might be different if George Pickens was a pure free agent and they could just offer him a deal and then bring him in. I still think that the Titans would not do that, but you would at least consider it at that point in time. A trade, not considering that whatsoever. And quite honestly, when we go to talk about what the Tennessee Titans should do in free agency at wide receiver, that's where it gets complicated, because a guy like George Pickens probably going to get the franchise tag. A guy like Alec Pierce probably going to re-sign with the Indianapolis Colts, maybe even get franchise tagged himself. I think that Michael Pittman Jr. could become available if the Colts do bring back Alec Pierce on a big-time deal. But there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. They could just restructure his contract. They could agree to a contract extension to change his money. Now, the reason why I think Michael Pittman Jr. could be available is because right now the Colts can cut him and save $25 $24 million on the salary cap. And that's probably more than what they're even going to have to pay Alec Pierce. Pierce probably be 20, 22 million, 24 at the most. So it would be easy to get rid of Michael Pittman Jr. and then immediately use that money to bring back Alec Pierce. Only $5 million in dead money if they cut Michael Pittman Jr. So I think if all of the guys that we're going to talk about here, Michael Pittman Jr. is the most realistic and smart option, in my opinion, to bring onto the team. 6'2", 210 pounds, good route runner for a guy his size, can catch the football with contact, go over the middle, and make plays. That's the type of player that Cam Ward needs to throw to, with a long arm, big catch radius. Is he a downfield vertical speed threat? No. Not really, but he is the perfect guy that Alec Iomanor could learn from because they have similar skill sets. That's a guy who I compared Alec Iomanor to going into the draft. I thought him and Jaden Higgins both reminded me of Michael Pittman Jr. So I would love to bring MPJ over to the Titans, but again, there is a high likelihood that the Colts just redo his deal and he never actually gets to free agency. And then the next guy that I would be interested in would be Wan'Dale Robinson. Now, Robinson, he has a shot to make it to free agency, but we already got reports over the weekend that Wan'Dale Robinson probably going to get re-signed by the New York Giants. Now, the Titans could go in at the combine, tell his agent, we're going to throw big time money at you. Don't go back to New York. And he did very well in Brian Daboll's system. He had 90 plus catches in back-to-back years. He went over 1,000 receiving yards this season as that slot guy in Brian Daboll's offense. So I think Wan'Dale Robinson, out of all, I would like Alec Pierce the most. I would like Michael Pittman Jr. after him if either of them become available. But after that, for me, it's Wan'Dale Robinson. I think he would be an absolutely excellent signing for the Tennessee Titans. There are some big-bodied vertical threats in the draft that I would be interested in for the Titans. And Wan'Dale Robinson with Chim Dike and Calvin Ridley and Alec Iomanor, that would just be a perfect fit in my opinion. But again, maybe Wan'Dale Robinson isn't available. And then you ask yourself, well, who would be available? Romeo Doubs is going to be available. But I continue to look at Romeo Doubs and I'm just like, is this really what we want to spend $18 million a year on? Is Romeo Doubs really a guy that takes this wide receiver group to another level? Like, we're talking about a guy who has never even had more than 725 yards in a season. Never had more than 59 catches in a season. Like, I just don't see it. You know, not really a yards after catch threat. He's a physical guy, 6'2", you know, bigger body guy, will go up and make catches. He's not afraid to be physical, but everybody's like, oh, you know, Calvin Ridley, he drops the football all the time. Well, Romeo Doubs has had 25 drops in 4 seasons. His drop rate is 7.8%. You know, he's not really a vertical threat. He's not going to break tackles. He's only broke 7 tackles in his whole career. His yards after catch is 3.1 per reception. Like, Romeo Doubs is the most average of average wide receivers in the NFL. And I just don't understand how paying him $15 to $18 million a year is some massive upgrade that's going to help Cam Ward in a big way. Like, go get somebody in the draft in the second round and give him those reps over Romeo Doubs. Now, if Doubs is going to take $10, $12 million a year, sure, that's the kind of value that I would accept, but I'm just not as excited about a guy like Romeo Doubs as some of you guys seem to be. Now, there are other names out there, but I'm really not interested in Mike Evans. Mike Evans ain't coming to the Titans. Like, he's going to go back to Tampa Bay, or he's probably going to retire, or he's going to go ring chase, which is exactly what a Hall of Famer like Mike Evans should do. Deebo Samuel is washed. Okay, he is a gadget player with a big-time name. Brandon Ayuk, I don't want him anywhere near the Tennessee Titans locker room with the kind of guy that he is. Jawan Jennings, I have yelled on the mountaintop, and I will continue to yell on the mountaintop. I have no interest in Jauan Jennings. He is simply NWI in Kyle Shanahan's offense. Doesn't break tackles, drops the ball, always gets hurt, doesn't run good routes, pushes off all the time. And I don't think he's like a good dude. All right? I don't want Jauan Jennings whatsoever on this team. And quite honestly, the only people who get in my comments and say they want Jauan Jennings are Tennessee Vols fans, because you just like the Vols and you want a Vol on the team. And that does nothing for me. I have no college bias. I don't love Buckeyes more than I'm sitting here telling you I don't want Carnell Tate this year. So, I just don't buy that as an option. Rashid Shaheed, maybe, but he's really just Chimdike. They do the same things. And then maybe a guy like Christian Kirk, I guess, but he basically did nothing for the Texans until the playoffs came and Nico Collins was banged up and he got a bunch more opportunities. So, why would I give Christian Kirk any opportunities over Chimdike? It just doesn't make sense for where the Tennessee Titans are at and being in line with Cam Ward to grow with Cam Ward. So, I would take Michael Pittman Jr. That would be my number one target if he became available. I would take Wan'Dale Robinson. That would be very exciting. But outside of those guys, there's just not really anybody who gets me going in any way. Now, if the Titans really wanted to get an answer, it's funny. I was having a conversation with someone on Twitter, and they were like, the Titans need to get a number one wide receiver. Yeah, they do. Who? Who's the number one wide receiver that's actually available? And he said back to me, Wan'Dale Robinson. Guys, listen, I'll never announce to you that I'm done responding to people on social media, but there will be signs. All right? One day I'm just going to stop responding to anybody because I got people out here arguing with me that Wan'Dale Robinson is a number one wide receiver in the NFL. Oh, brother. It's hard to deal with sometimes. It's hard to deal with. As much as I love to engage, my Lord, it can be tough to deal with. But again, if the Titans actually wanted to try to go get a number one wide receiver, trade for Marvin Harrison Jr., trade for Garrett Wilson, those are the only even mildly realistic options that I can think of. You guys are going to be saying, A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown ain't coming back to Tennessee. He's unhappy in Philadelphia. You think he's going to come back to Tennessee? Come on, man. Come on. Get out of here with that. So the reality here is, guys, whether it's free agency, a trade, there just aren't a lot of realistic options to get a number one star wide receiver. When I hear number one wide receiver, I think Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jackson Smith-Njigba. These guys don't come available. You have to draft your own. You have to draft your own. That's the answer. So I'm just not overly enamored by any of these options that we've talked about. But again, if Michael Pittman Jr. comes available, that would be a perfect signing in the offseason for the Titans. And I would like Wan'Dale Robinson as a number two option as well. But with that in mind, the Titans need to attack free agency at other positions as well, like edge rusher and like cornerback. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want a candidate who truly matches what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all the boxes with less stress and less time and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support this show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast, looking at what I would do in a perfect free agency for the Tennessee Titans. Yes, everyone wants a number one wide receiver, but the reality is there aren't any available. So the Titans got to look at other options. But where I think they could get a number one player at a position of need is at edge rusher, because there are a lot more options that could be available in free agency there. And I think the number one at the top of my list is Trey Hendrickson. Hendrickson is a guy who fits perfectly in Robert Saleh's system as a strong side defensive end, can put his hand in the dirt, set the edge against the run. And I know that last year he was banged up a little bit. The Bengals were a clown show all year, and he didn't want to come back and be disrespected by that organization. He could still get the franchise tag. I am aware that he could be tagged just like George Pickens. I know that. But I think that it's much more likely that Trey Hendrickson avoids the tag than it is George Pickens. So if Hendrickson avoids the franchise tag, he has to be the number one target for the Tennessee Titans, in my opinion, in all of free agency. Out of all of the free agent candidates, Trey Hendrickson should be the number one target. 17 and a half sacks in back-to-back seasons in 2023 and 2024. He's a guy who could still get it done at the top of the NFL as a pass rusher. Again, a big physical guy who fits perfectly in Robert Saleh's system. You could have him there. Imagine if you had him there and Reuben Bain or David Bailey on the other side. That would be a tremendous boost to the Tennessee Titans edge rusher position, which, in my opinion, was maybe the worst in the NFL last season. So Hendrickson is at the top of the list for me, but I would also like a guy like Odafe Oweh. I think Oweh is another super athletic, freak athletic guy who was raw coming out of college, but has developed into a really, really good pass rusher. Got traded from Baltimore to the Chargers. I don't think that the Chargers will let him go. I don't think you trade for a guy like that if you don't have intentions of bringing him back, but maybe he declines. He wants to go to the open market. If he does, I think Odafe Oweh makes a ton of sense. I like Jalen Phillips as well. I really do. But out of Hendrickson, Oweh, Phillips, I think Phillips is the least likely to actually hit free agency. Phillips has dealt with a ton of injuries in his career, dealt with a ton of injuries in college. Now, he's been productive at the NFL level, hasn't been banged up all the time. You know, he had a major injury a couple of years ago, but he's a pretty good player. I just don't think he fits the system as well as Oweh or as Hendrickson specifically. And again, I think Phillips is the least likely of the three to actually hit free agency. Now, there are some other options here too who I guess I just don't see them as game changers. I wouldn't be as excited. You could go get Joey Bosa. Bosa had an okay year for the Bills. He always gets hurt at this stage in his career, but Robert Saleh does have a relationship with Nick Bosa. Maybe that greases the skids. They take a chance on him on a one-year deal. But if you're Joey Bosa, why would you come to Tennessee when you could continue to ring chase for good teams? I just don't think that fit makes a lot of sense, but he is out there. Who I do think makes a lot of sense is Kwity Paye. Kwity Paye from the Indianapolis Colts, former first-round pick. Look, he is not a great pass rusher. He never truly developed into a great pass rusher. But he is big, he is physical, and he is a good player against the run. He is a good run player. Now, again, he would not be high on my list. We're talking about 7th, 8th, 9th edge rusher that I would pivot to. But at some point, even though he's not a dynamic pass rusher and he's really a great run stopper, he's still a more talented edge rusher than what the Titans have right now. So if you get him on a cheaper deal as a value veteran, that could make a ton of sense. Now, I think the Titans will sign 2 edge rushers in free agency, but one of them is going to be a depth player, going to be a role player. I look at A.J. Espinoza from the Buffalo Bills. Clelin Ferrell and Yetur Gross-Matos, who just played for Robert Saleh in San Francisco. Sam Williams, who just played for Aaron Whitecotton with the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe the Titans want to bring back Draymond Jones. But if I'm the Titans and it's my perfect offseason, I'm signing Trey Hendrickson and I'm signing Sam Williams. I think that would be a great move going forward. On the interior defensive line, I'm going to continue to pound the table for John Franklin Myers. John Franklin Myers is one of the most underrated, most productive interior defensive linemen. He could play a little bit on the edge and big physical fronts. He could slide inside and rush the passer. Give me John Franklin Myers. Bring back Sebastian Joseph Day. Makes a ton of sense. Now, I know that you guys don't want to see T'Vondre Sweat get traded, but I will tell you this. If T'Vondre Sweat does get traded, a guy like Sheldon Rankins, who had a bounce-back season, a guy like Tim Settles, a guy like Roy Lopez, I think all make sense as bigger-bodied defensive tackles who also could be interior penetrators and fit better in Robert Saleh's defensive scheme. So Sheldon Rankins, Tim Settles, Roy Lopez would all be names that I would be thinking about if T'Vondre Sweat is traded. I don't think he will be traded. So John Franklin Myers, Sebastian Joseph Day, Jeffrey Simmons, T'Vondre Sweat, that's a really good interior defensive line group right there. That would be what I would do. Now, we do got to talk about cornerback as we move away from the defensive front. And here's what I'll say. The Titans need to sign 2 cornerbacks. They need to sign a high-end cornerback at the top of the market, and they need to sign a depth veteran cornerback as well. And my number one target at cornerback is Alontae Taylor. There you go, Vols fans. If you're mad that I don't want Juwan Jennings, here's your Tennessee Vol for you. Alontae Taylor is physical. He's nasty. He's feisty. He can play in zone. He can play man. He can blitz off the edge. He's super versatile. I love Alontae Taylor as a player. I just love his personality out on the football field. He would be a number one option for me. Now, if he's not available, or if the Titans don't go that route, Tariq Woolen, man. I do love me some Tariq Woolen. 6'3", 4.3 speed. He's just a freak athlete and an outlier. And in Robert Saleh's defensive scheme that runs a ton of cover 3 and runs a ton of cover 4 where wide receivers are basically manned up on the outside down the sideline, Tariq Woolen has a great ability to erase his matchup in that area of the field. So Tariq Woolen and Alontae Taylor are head-to-head for me, but I'm going to go with Alontae Taylor, who I think is more likely to be a Tennessee Titan. Now, Jalen Watson from the Kansas City Chiefs makes a ton of sense. Maybe the Titans would take a chance on Trevon Diggs, who is best in a zone system. Cam Taylor-Britt from the Cincinnati Bengals, I think, would be a good signing if you don't want to go with any of the top of the market guys. If the Titans go to the next level, I think a guy like Nashawn Wright, who had a good year with the Chicago Bears. Josh Jobe, again, a Seattle Seahawks cornerback who could play that cover 3, cover 4 style. I think the guy that they ultimately end up with as their depth signing, though, is Akello Witherspoon, a veteran who plays zone coverage. He's a big physical corner who can play on the outside. If you leave with Alontae Taylor and Akello Witherspoon, you draft a cornerback in the first 3 rounds in the NFL draft. You add that to Marcus Harris. You bring back Darrell Baker Jr. You have Micah Robinson as a development 6th cornerback. I think that's a much better group than what you started with going into the offseason. Now at safety, I'm going to continue to say that I think that they bring in Jason Pinnock. They're not going to pay starting safety money with Kevin Winston and Amani Hooker in their positions right now. Pinnock played for Robert Saleh with the Jets, played for Saleh this year with San Francisco. I think that's an easy transplant to bring Jason Pinnock over, who knows the defense, can play all 3 safety spots, can do the big nickel, can play back deep. I think Pinnock is one of the guys I am most confident in, ends up with the Titans. But hey, maybe they bring back Kevin Byard. Maybe they look at a guy like Nick Cross. I always liked Andre Sisco out of Texas. He's going to be available. Geno Stone is a guy I wanted a couple of years ago in free agency. Jaquan Brisker, another versatile physical safety from the Chicago Bears. Like I told you guys, there are so many good safeties in the market every year that it drops their value down, and the Titans can basically have their pick of the litter. Now, let me say this. I don't think the Titans go get a linebacker in free agency. But if they do go get a linebacker in free agency, they better go big. And I want Devin Lloyd from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Physical, can blitz, can drop in coverage and make plays on the ball. Devin Lloyd is the Mike, with Cedric Gray as the Will, and Femi Oladejo as the Sam linebacker. That's a great linebacker group. But all I'll say is this. Robert Saleh has gotten the best out of linebackers. So I would maybe be more interested in developing the guys that they have and maybe looking to the draft than I would be going out and spending big money at linebacker. But if they do, give me Devin Lloyd. But with that being said, we got to hit the depth positions on the offensive side of the ball. It's time to talk running back, right guard, tight end, and backup quarterback. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Look, the winter games are officially here. And if you're anything like me, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the winter games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angles on the sports that you care about the most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that start slow but somehow get intense fast. Speed skating races that are decided by inches. Hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off. I also love the bobsledding teams. I absolutely love that. And shout out to my guy Pep, my buddy Pep, who just absolutely loves the curling matches. Again, they have been so fantastic. Shout out Team USA out there, upsetting everybody. Even every niche event becomes must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Titans fans, let's continue and cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast, looking at my perfect free agency for the Tennessee Titans. Again, they should not trade for George Pickens, even if it means they can't get a wide receiver one. He doesn't make a lot of sense as a trade target. They should, however, go get Trey Hendrickson in free agency if he becomes available. But now we need to talk about adding depth spots on the offense. Before I dive in, thank you for making Locked On Titans your first listen. Remember, you can join the Locked On Titans Everydayer Club. It's only $5 a month. That's the cost of a cup of coffee nowadays. You get access to ad-free versions of this podcast with no problems, no issues. It's going to show up right in your podcast feed that you already use. You also get to be in the Locked On Titans group chat, which is so much fun on Discord. You guys are really missing out if you're not in there, and you get access to a Locked On Titans merch store as well. But with that being said, make sure that you guys join the Everydayer Club. Thank you so much for always tuning in. But running back is a big one. I think that Tony Pollard is going to be cut. And if Tony Pollard is cut, the Tennessee Titans are going to have to go into free agency and get a veteran running back. And I think it's very important for the Tennessee Titans to get a true power running back. I'm not going to argue the Tony Pollard thing with you guys again. I have made myself clear on how I feel about that. He's not a power back. He's massively overrated by the Titans fan base. He's not good in short yardage or goal line. And that's what the Titans need to complement Tajay Spears and get the best out of their running back room. Tony Pollard needs to go be a number 2 running back somewhere else. He can't be the number 1 here anymore. But a lead power back, for me, I love Tyler Algier. Tyler Algier isn't the flashiest name in the NFL, but he runs so hard. He runs so hard. He's going to be a great guy in those short yardage, goal line situations. He can run through arm tackles. He's north and south, get downhill. That's exactly what the Titans need. In Brian Daboll's system, he always has. He always has a power runner. Now, Saquon Barkley could do both, but Cam Skattebo in his offense last year was fantastic until he got injured. I think Tyler Algier is the perfect fit of we're going to get value with this because it's not going to break the bank, but he can also fill his role perfectly for the Titans. Now, I am not against Breece Hall. If the Titans want to get Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker, I'm all for it. I don't like paying running backs big-time money as a roster-building philosophy, but when you have Cam Ward on a rookie deal and when you don't have anybody else on the team that needs to be paid, going out and throwing a big-time contract at a running back like Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker for $11 or $12 million a season, I could stomach that. I would not be mad about it whatsoever. Like, get a playmaker at running back. Sure, you can afford it right now. It's not going to be a money problem. But I just think that it's less likely than the Titans going out and get a value veteran like Tyler Algier. I would also be very interested in Rachaad White, Brian Robinson. Those guys make a lot of sense to me as well, who are more in the Tyler Algier range. Okay? Now, moving to tight end. I have been open again, like with Tony Pollard. I am out on Chigakonkwo. If he wants to come back for $5-6 million on a one-year deal, sure, we can do that as a tight end 2.5, who is just a utility player that gets mixed in special packages. But I need 2 real tight ends, 2 actual traditional tight ends to function in Brian Daboll's offense, okay? And why not go get a guy who actually was in Brian Daboll's offense? Daniel Bellinger makes a ton of sense for the Titans as a big-bodied, traditional tight end that not only can catch the football, but also can block as well. And there are so many good tight end options. I'll take Daniel Bellinger, but Cade Otton would be awesome. David Njoku, awesome. Dawson Knox, probably going to get cut by the Buffalo Bills. Awesome. Would love that. Adam Troutman, Dayton's finest, baby. I would take Adam Troutman, the former Dayton Flyer. George Fant, that's the offensive tackle. Noah Fant, I would take Noah Fant. Tyler Higbee, a little bit older, of course. Heck, if the Titans wanted to go out and get Dallas Goedert, I wouldn't be that mad about it. He's a good player. You know, like, it's like with running back, there are so many options at tight end to fill this need, and it's not going to cost a lot of money. Give me Daniel Bellinger, but I would truly be over the moon happy with any of the options that I just mentioned outside of Tyler Higbee, who again is a little bit older, but could still fill that role. At right guard, which out of all the spots that we're talking about, might be the most important. Go get Dylan Parham. Young player, only 26, athletic, can play right guard for the Titans in year 1, transition over to center in year 2 after Lloyd Cushenberry is gone, can compete with Jackson Slater and make him better, and then maybe in 2027, Slater is your starting right guard and Parham is your starting center. I think that would make a ton of sense. I would like Elijah Vera Tucker, but he's had a lot of injuries, guys. And I know that he has experience with Robert Saleh from their time together in New York, but is Mike Borgonzi really going to go out and get a guy who's dealt with that many injuries? I guess color me skeptical there. A guy who I really like, who is a little bit on the older side, though, is Wyatt Teller. Wyatt Teller is a good player in Cleveland. He did zone runs. He did power runs. He has done everything that the Titans are going to ask their offensive linemen to do. If the Titans miss out on some of the top options, like Parham, like AVT, I would pivot to Wyatt Teller. I think he's a good player. He's just also dealt with some injuries and some poor play at times, but everybody in Cleveland was bad last year, it felt like. So I'll give him a pass on that. If the Titans go to the bargain bin at right guard, and let's say they believe in Jackson Slater, and they don't want to get somebody who needs to be the starter. They just want to bring in someone to compete with Jackson Slater. I think Tevin Jenkins, who was a failed offensive tackle, but looked pretty good last year in moments where he got to play at guard. I would take a shot on Tevin Jenkins. You might be getting a high-end starter who's matured as a player in Tevin Jenkins. And Zion Johnson has dealt with injuries, hasn't lived up to his draft pedigree, but if you want to bring in someone to compete with Jackson Slater, who maybe will mature a little bit under the tutelage of Carmen Brasillo and turn into the player that he was meant to be, that's an option that I would consider for cheap. Now, backup quarterback, Mitch Trubisky is my pick, but I would take Tyrod Taylor. I would take Snoop Huntley. I would take Teddy Bridgewater. And again, a lot of you guys say, what about Will Levis? I think Will Levis is going to be traded. And quite honestly, I don't want Will Levis in the quarterback room with Cam Ward. That's a toxic, terrible situation. Let Levis go to a new opportunity. Let him start fresh and try to go to a place where he has a chance to be the starting quarterback. It's best for both parties for them to break up. So give me Trubisky, give me Tyrod Taylor, give me Snoop Huntley. All of those guys make a ton of sense as like solid, good veteran backup quarterback that can help Cam Ward become his best self as well. But let me know your picks in free agency. That's going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.